Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of The Working Ant with me, your host and coach, Rami Balut. And what a pleasure it continues to remain to be a part of your journey. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're in great spirits. I hope you are feeling positive and excited about the future. There's a lot of things I want to talk to you about today, but first and foremost, really just want to check up on you and just make sure that you're doing okay. Woke up this morning to find some more bad news, not surprising, of course, around career layoffs and whatnot. And I was like, okay, enough of this. I think so much of this is going to take place, and it's not a matter of choosing to ignore it, but rather choosing to see things as they are. And I think, in today's day, your ability to see things for what they are, as they are, becomes so much more of a challenge. And I say that because, it's like here we are anticipating so many things that could be taking place every single day. And for the most part, hey, we may be right. More bad news may be coming our way. But when we actually see things for what they are and as they are, they sort of inject this level of kindness, a level of appreciation, and a level of trust that things are just going to happen as they've intended to happen over anything else. And I think it's really, really important to be able to see that through the lens of opportunity. And, if you're like most people these days, you're thinking that there's very, very little opportunity out there. And that opportunity typically relates to, hey, am I going to get my next job if something were to happen? And we've sort of like built up this narrative to frame ever so precisely, ever so exactly a narrative around getting another job. And that's like the opportunity there. It's like getting another job or keeping my existing job. That's the existential crisis. That's the threat. That's what everyone is talking about these days. And one is trying to fight to acquire something while the other is fighting to preserve it. And when we narrow our thinking to this just one topic of conversation, although extremely important. I mean, obviously we need jobs, we need our bread and butter, we need to afford a house over our homes, feeding our families, feeding our aspirations, our desires, the quality of life that we have built for ourselves and our families. There's no getting around that. But here it's almost like when everyone is talking about this opportunity related to a role, a job, we can imagine how many other opportunities are being totally neglected or removed from the equation completely. And I find that to be totally unacceptable. It's totally unacceptable when we actually like frame in our minds just this one like precise thing around jobs, rather than connection, rather than the opportunity to build up someone's social capital more so than they've ever thought before, rather than the opportunity to reflect, rather than the opportunity to connect not just with oneself, but with one's capabilities. These are all things one could be doing these days, but yet we choose to focus on getting the job or keeping the job, when in fact it's all the other things that culminate into actually getting the job or keeping the job. And if you think about it, just think about that for just a moment here. We're all thinking about staying in jobs that we may or may not like. Some of us may love our jobs and we're doing everything we can to keep it. Others are completely not happy with their jobs, and they're doing everything to preserve it because that's all they think they can do today. But there are others where like they're on the fence. I'm not necessarily liking their job or disliking their job, but it pays the bills. And so, of course, again, they are trying to keep it. Maybe not clinging as hard as others are, but they certainly are trying to keep it, especially in an economy like this. But what we tend to forget are all the other things that prevent us from having optics of opportunity. And what I mean by that is, looking at things very, very differently. For those of you that enjoy connecting with other people, for those of you that are curious about other people's stories, for those of you that go further and far beyond and between everything that's been required of you simply because it's natural to you. well, then you probably know much more about what I mean than those of us that are just so pounded and compounded and aggregated with work that we have little time to make the space to even think about these things. And it's sort of like the ride or die. And that sort of like mentality causes an enormous amount of stress. It causes an enormous amount of anxiety. It suppresses so much of our creativity. It diminishes a lot of our capability because we don't necessarily either have the time or the willpower to go out seeking something better. And so we just become in this flux. And if we don't have the optics of opportunity, if you don't see things from the lens of possibilities, then it's very, very unlikely you're going to get far ahead. And even if an opportunity actually does come your way, it's unlikely you're going to be able to capitalize it on the way others would if you had optics of opportunity. And so let's talk about that today, because it's not a matter of having options, because you may think you don't have options at this point. It may just be a matter of you not having optics of opportunity. And again, here, what I'm trying to say is everything that you are attempting to do at this point in time to preserve what you already have, well, you have it. It's there. But what about the elements that is required for you, not just to preserve, but to go far and beyond things that you've wanted and aspired to in your career? If you're yearning for something more, if you've had this appetite and palate for more, and you're unable to do so right now, I'm going to tell you, you know what? If you make the space for it, you make the time for it, it's so likely that you can make it something important and prioritize it for the future. But you've got to believe in doing so. If you don't believe in doing so, well, you're never going to have the optics to actually see things better than what they are. And so at minimum, we see things for what they are as they are. There's an economic crisis. People are getting laid off. There's this whole bank issue happening every other day. There's this question of like morality again from the financiers of this world. I'll probably continue on questioning since time immemorial. But, there's this primary focus on things that may not necessarily be helpful to us. And so I want you to practice an art of thinking much more clearly about where you are and how these optics of opportunity can play into your favor. So I may have dripped this a little bit in our conversation today, but the first thing is seeing things for what they are. You've got to see things for what they are. If you don't see things for what they are, you're going to get in trouble, because some people typically see things. We talk about the power of bad all the time, right? Some people, many people, I would argue, probably most people, especially these days, see things much worse than what it is that they are. So they may see like a layoff happening, finding out today at Amazon, and they'll say to themselves, oh my gosh, the economy's crumbling, I'm next. From the lens of an employee at Amazon, that probably is the reality. From the lens of someone who's not there, well, you know what? Out of sight, out of mind. What you don't see, what you don't hear is probably what you don't feel, right? But just imagine, for example, for just 1 second here, that you were actually impacted from all of these layoffs, or that your life that you've built for yourself and for your family, for one reason or another, is seriously called into question. Well, what do? Well, you don't panic. That's for one. Although it's hard not to. Well, you don't get anxiety, but it's also hard not to. At minimum, you see things for what they are. And the reality is, if you have built yourself up to a place and a position of where you can truly understand yourself, where you can truly understand how your value, what you bring, the outcomes that you can produce, the leadership that you may have, irrespective of title, irrespective of scope, the sway of behavior, the understanding that you have of people, the connection you can actually bring, the patterns you may actually see, all of these wonderful attributes that I know so many of you have. I'm sure you have so many of these. But in today's day, in today's market, it's just so hard for us to see it. And the reason why we just don't see it is because we're just churning and churning and churning and churning work. And we're churning and churning and churning anxiety and fear of what the future is going to hold. Yes, many of us are much more um, inflexible with what we're spending and how we're spending. But what about the spending of our time? What about the investment that you're making in listening to this? What about the investment you're making in creating new relationships? What about the investment that you're making in better understanding yourself and up-leveling your capabilities and your skill sets? What about the investments you're making in your life and in your career? These are all things where if we're investing our time in the worries of what is yet to come, we're not looking at things from optics of opportunity. And the way I want you to see things is always through a lens of opportunity. That's how you're going to win in this game. That's how you're going to get ahead. That's how you're going to do right by yourself. That's how you're going to do right by your family. That's how you're going to do right by all these aspirations, this beat that you've got inside of your head, that those recesses of memories and thoughts in your mind, all of these things that typically come about simply because we've got so much more in us that we're allowed to actually flex and promote and pursue in our day-to-day. Why? Because we've tied ourselves not just to a job, but we've tied ourselves psychologically to something that's so hard to pull out of. And you don't need me to remind you of this, but your work is not your identity, right? And what you do today, you may feel that you are doing so much more than what you're actually being paid for. Well, welcome to the world of working for the most part. But I want you to be able to take some space out for yourself, slow down time, pause for perspective, look at things with opportunity. When something comes your way, don't dismiss it just outright. Look at it, examine it, study and critique it. Study and critique what could possibly be an opportunity that's right there in front of you. If you've made a quick decision today, study and critique why you made that quick decision. If you're looking at things with very strong, often emotionally charged opinions, ask yourself why you are having them. Typically, and most likely, we have lost a lot of contact with our inner self. I'm not talking about the inner spiritual self. I'm talking about your inner natural self, your natural capabilities, your natural persona, your attitude, your acceptance and your engagement with life itself. And so when we actually lose touch with this, we are so much more ineffective at understanding, our capabilities, but more importantly, and more drastically at this point in time, we are less equipped of positioning ourselves in a positive state of mind to produce a compelling narrative over the work that we actually do. And so it's no wonder at times that we can feel like down. It's no wonder at times we can feel like, we just feel like we're in this neutral zone. It's just not going here. It's not going there. I'm in it. I'm just working and working and working, and I don't know where I'm going. But at the end of the day, I'm tired, so it probably should say something. It should say I'm working hard. And if I'm working hard, that's a good thing because it's a disciplined and principled approach to life. And yet at the same time, I feel that I'm not where I should be, and I'm not really understanding why that is. Well, I can tell you why, and I'm going to say it right now. It's because you don't see things from a lens of opportunity. The optics of opportunity is what creates moments of grace, create moments of interaction that you haven't had before. And yes, it does create moments of discomfort. But overall, it creates opportunities. It creates the opportunities you're looking for yourself to create after all this time. And it may not convert almost instantaneously, but you should be able to plant these seeds, to plant these conversations, to go out of your way for people, to play to people's desires and needs by doing so, to understand that in order for you to be effective in being in your current vocation, it's your better understanding of yourself. And if you can understand yourself, I can promise you'll reach a point where you don't really need to worry about other people understanding you. In fact, if you can understand yourself better, you'll probably be more able to seek out opportunity even when you're not deliberately doing so anymore. It just becomes innate because you are comfortable with the fact that this is all going to work out. And not only that, we're going to take it further. We're going to see things better than what they are. This is all going to work out in your favor. So you've got to see things in a lens and optics of opportunity. You've got to go out in pursuit of those goals without haste. Please, please, please think about how you can convert yourself instantaneously to go do an action that you may not have been comfortable doing simply because, you know what, it's not the time right now. The focus should be somewhere else. Well, I'm going to actually ask you to say that, to tell yourself at minimum, the focus should be right there within you. You should be focusing on yourself. You should be focusing on all of these things that may have happened and occurred over the last year where we saw things completely boom in this world and all of a sudden bust. And we're thinking to ourselves like, well, how am I going to capitalize out of all of this? How is this system going to work in my favor? And the only way it's going to be able to do so is if you actually create your own system and stop relying on the system that was created for you. The only way you're going to be able to do so is create your own opportunities before someone else takes their opportunity and imposes it on you. And if you may say to yourself like, hey, Rami, you know what? I'm just looking to get my next gig, my next play. And that's primarily what my focus is right now. Great, wonderful. Let's do it. But at minimum, if you can better understand the value you are going to create, at minimum, you have a better chance of scoring that job, that role. At minimum, you probably have a better chance of negotiating your total compensation when it comes to that role. And at minimum, you'll be able to create an agenda and a charter for yourself with a level of expectation that is authentic and that is aligned to you. So you can sustain this level of excitement. So you can sustain this level of input and output and added value constantly day after day. So you can start auditing what you supply and you receive and then ask yourself like, hey, what would I like to be doing today? What would I like to be giving today? Who would I like to be interacting with today? What would I like to be hearing and engaging conversation with? If you don't look at things with an optic of opportunity, it's very, very rare that something good is going to come out of a situation like this. It could stay good in the fact that like, hey, we've kept our jobs. We've rode out this entire storm. But I don't think that's a life that is truly, truly deserving of you. I'm one to believe, if you're listening to me right now, I'm one to believe that you've got so much more to give and that there's so much more there within you that you're able to do. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, you may feel like you just don't have the time for it, or, that there's no other choice. And when in fact, there actually is a choice. We talked about that our last episode here on the Working Ant. I really want you to look at things like, if I'm going to meet someone for the very first time today, how can I go out of my way to connect deeper with that person? If someone reached out to me for something today, rather than ignoring it, why don't I just entertain it? If there's someone that I want to be speaking with, that I wish I actually could speak to, why don't I write that person with no expectation of getting a response in return? It doesn't matter. This whole idea of a sunk cost fallacy can only go as far as you want it to go without you breaking the bank here. And here psychologically as well. If you're going to reach out to somebody, well, reach out to somebody. If they're going to write you back, they'll write you back. If you need to practice going after what it is you seek after. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is through a lens, eyes of opportunity, optics of opportunity. And I want you to look at life that way. I want you to get up and stand up and walk out wherever you are today, whenever you're listening to this, have a completely open, sort of chested mindset and heart of who you're going to engage with, how you're going to engage with that person, the hearing and listening you're going to be able to give, listening with your complete self, not just with one part of your body while you're thinking about something else that may be lurking in the background. Be able to have a depth of a conversation that you're looking for. And then you'll discover so many things here that you could capitalize on for yourself. But again, you've got to learn to look at things with a lens of opportunity. It's not that we don't have the opportunity. It's that we don't have the lens and the optics of opportunity. Everything that comes your way is an opportunity. Everything you interact with is an opportunity. Every moment you're listening to this and thinking, okay, where do I go right now? What do I do next? Do I write something? Do I reach out to somebody? Do I call somebody? Do I schedule a meeting with somebody? What do I do? That's an opportunity. Everything that comes your way is an opportunity. If you look at it that way, then life actually is much more fruitful. It's much more joyful. The power of bad that constantly bombards us every single day, taking away our attention span, doesn't seem to be so bad. It actually seems to be just quite normal, as things typically are. And if you understand things in the context of, well, you know what? Bad news sells. Well, you also understand the context of like, hey, good news is actually good for you. And if you become the guardian of your mind, if you just become the guardian of your mind and you just stand there and filter out what comes in and what stays out, and you take in what's going to be useful for you, not simply convenient, but useful for you, I promise you'll be so much better off, not just as a professional, but as a person as well. Remember, you do have choice if you have optics of opportunity. And with that said, thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Working Ant. I just love spending my time with you. I wish we could spend so much more time. But thank you for subscribing to my channel. I've got a couple of new subscribers. Not that I'm promoting my YouTube channel really, more so than my podcast, but I appreciate those of you that have subscribed there. It's nice knowing that there are people out there listening to this watching this on video rather. And for my listeners around the world, thank you. You know who you are. Thanks for the messages. Thanks for the emails. Thanks for all the love and support. I love spending my time with you. I love providing some level of insight, some level of comfort over like what's going to happen. We're all thinking about like, hey, what's going to happen next? Where do we go from here? You are already here. You're here. That's what matters. It's like, Rami, where do we go from here? Where do I take myself from here? Well, you're here. You're here. You are here. That's your answer. You're here. Now go out, seek opportunity, capitalize on an opportunity, use that opportunity, and remember, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? Well, I'm going to close out for real this time. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Working Ant. I will see you next week. Until then, take care of yourself and of each other. Bye for now.